Hello and welcome to this course, which is called Introduction to Computers, a course about all the bits and bobs that make your computer pop. Hopefully, not literally. So this course is going to be about essentially an overview of the different aspects of a computer, things like input and output, software and hardware, what is binary, what even is a computer, all of these things and many more in this course. So if you are interested in learning more about computers, if you're interested in technology, maybe you want to do a course about computer science, this will be perfect for you as a beginner, as this will help you get a high level introduction into computers. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the course. So first off, we are going to talk about what is a computer? What even is it? I mean, we have things such as smartphones, laptops, desktops, PCs, and with the emergence of smartwatches, the whole idea of what a computer is kind of all up in the air. So we're going to try and sort of get some sort of definition to it and try and make the whole idea, the whole definition of what is a computer slightly more intuitive. So if we go on to the all-knowing Google and we try to find out what Google thinks a computer is, we type in what is a computer question mark Google, and we'll get something along the lines of that a computer is an electronic device for storing and processing data, typically in the form of binary and according to instructions given to it in a variable program. Also, it says that computer is a program who makes calculations, especially with the calculating machine. But we'll focus on the first one. The second one, I don't know what Google is doing, so let's not focus too much on that. So, what does this statement actually mean? Now, let's take a hypothetical scenario. You get into your DeLorean, if you happen to have one, and you decide to go back 100 years into the past. You end up in what it will be 1920. It will be just after the First World War, and it will be an interesting time. And now you're in 1920, right? So you might see marching women on the streets. You might see some rather odd looking cars. You might see the first ever typewriter, depending on where you are. And of course, we also have the fancy music and the dance and so forth. But what I want you to do is imagine you're walking down the street and you want to get back to 2020. So you open Google Maps, you're trying to find the quickest route back when someone, a local, notices you. They see you walking down in, let's be honest, they'll think you're wearing some odd looking clothes and you've got some weird thing in your hand that's shiny. They come up to you and they say, "What even is that? And who are you?" And they'll be very amazed by the idea of who you are. But you try and explain to them that what you have in your hand is just a smartphone. They say, "What is a smartphone?" And you say, "Well, I guess it's a computer that does some things and it's quite clever and all that." And they'll say, "Well, what is a computer then?" And you say, "Well, a computer is just an electronic device for storing and processing data, typically in binary form according to instructions given to it in a variable program." Now, if someone said this to me and I had no idea what computers were, I would have no clue what they were just talking about. So the person will probably look at you even more confused than they were to begin with. So we need to break down this statement and define properly what a computer is so that when you meet someone who has no idea what they are, you can explain to them in a very easy to understand and intuitive manner. Okay, so I'm going to break this statement down into separate chunks. First of all, let's look at the first couple of words, which is that a computer is an electronic device. So fairly straightforward. Device is basically a machine, and electronic just means that it's a machine that's powered by electricity. So if someone then questions you saying, "Oh, electricity," then honestly, it's just magic. I mean, I can understand, I can see what electricity does, but if you ask me how to explain it and the details behind it, I couldn't help you there. So For modern people, they'll be able to understand, okay, it's a machine that is driven by electricity, but for all we know, it's basically just magic. But at least now we know that it's a machine of some sort, driven by some sort of energy. So let's move on to the next part, which is storing and processing data. So a computer is used for storing and processing data. Now, to explain this, I want you to imagine that you are a librarian, right? You're a librarian and someone comes in asking to find a book about how to make friends, right? Let's say they're in a position they want to make new friends. They ask you, okay, how do I make new friends? Is there a book? Do you have that could help me? And you look up into your computer if you have one, or a journal, or a book, or whatever you have, and you find out that in this particular aisle there is a book called How to Make Friends, and you direct that person to that aisle, to the section of the library. They get to the particular section, they grab the book, they bring it back to you, they say, oh, I like this book, can I take it out? Give it to you, you scan it, you do whatever you want with it. Keep a note of which book they are going to take out. Give the book to the person, the user, they take it, they go out. After a few days, they bring it back, they give it to you, they say, oh, brilliant, I've made a ton of new friends, it's a success, can I give this back to you? You say, cool, I'll take it. You take it back, you do whatever you need to do, you process the information, you say, okay, this book is now handed back to the library, and now you need to go back to the specific section of the library where it was previously stored, and you put it back there. So, in this scenario, you are essentially what a computer will do. Okay, you've basically done the job of a computer. And the person who was asking for the book is essentially the end user who will be using a computer. So let's go back to the actual statement, storing and processing data. So a computer essentially deals with information, which in more technical terms we call data. Okay, so anything that is in any way an information is essentially a data. So it could be some music videos, it could be some documents, it could be games, whatever. Any information that is stored, that is kept on a computer is essentially called data. And just like a librarian or a library, a computer can store information. It can process this information, right? Whatever needs to be done with this data, this information, it will do those things. And it can retrieve this information, right? Just like the librarian did with the book, it can retrieve the book and then find out where it is and all that stuff. So that's all that a computer can do with this term called data, which is just information. So essentially, in order to do specific actions, we have to tell the computer to do something, and the computer can then take the information and do whatever we need it to do with information. Okay, so that sort of deals with the second part of the statement. Then the third part talks about something called binary form. So a computer typically works in this thing called binary. And just think of binary as essentially the language of computers. So just like if you're in the UK, you will speak English. If you're in Spain, you'll speak Spanish and so forth. A computer speaks something called binary. Okay, it's a bunch of ones and zeros all put together to mean certain things, and the computer knows what they mean. We have to tell it what it means. But ultimately, if you wanted to communicate with the computer and you spoke English, you would have to translate your normal English into this binary form in order for the computer to understand what you want it to do. And in a later lesson in this course, I will go through the details of binary, what it means, how it works, how it's translated and so forth. So if you want to find out more about binary specifically, go into the lesson for binary. But in a very simplified manner, binary is essentially the language of computers. And then now on to the final part, which is that a computer will do actions according to the instructions we give it in a variable program. So there's two parts to it, variable and program. Let's take program first. So imagine you want to make a pizza, right? You find that recipe, You follow the recipe, you make the pizza, and you eat the pizza. Now, for you to make the pizza, you needed a recipe, essentially a set of instructions that you could follow to replicate the outcome that you want. A computer also needs a recipe for anything that it needs to do. And this recipe has to be in a certain format, has to be very sort of detailed, has to tell the computer what it needs to do and when it needs to do whatever it needs to do and how it needs to do all the stuff. And all of this is done using what's called a program. You can kind of think of it as a recipe in a more simplified way, but essentially it's just a set of instructions that you give to a computer to get the computer to do some actions. So that's what a program is. Now, what is a variable program? Essentially, it means that based on the input, based on the information you give to the computer, it will carry out a different output, a different outcome, depending on the information you give. So it's going back to the example of the pizza making, right? So say you find a recipe that's only for one pizza, but you need a recipe that's for 5 people, 5 pizzas, 5 people. So what do? You can use the same recipe, but you can increase the quantities to fit the need of 5 pizzas, right? So your program, your recipe is the same, but the input, the information that you give or that you're trying to get out of the recipe is slightly different. And based on the information, the initial input, your outcome will change. So if you are looking for one pizza recipe, you'll get one pizza in the end. If you were looking for 5 pizzas, you can use the same recipe, but just times the quantities by 5, and you can get 5 pizzas in the end. So similarly, a variable program just lets a computer use one program, but depending on what the input is, so what you tell it to do, the additional information, it will result in a different outcome, even though the initial recipe or the initial program is the same. So now we've kind of broken this down, and it's still very vague. So that's just how it is with computers. I mean, it's quite a broad subject, and even if you ask experts who've been working in this field for 10 odd years or so, and you ask them to explain what a computer is, it would be difficult to make it even more simpler than it is without losing relevant information. So, but now imagine you go back into 1920 and someone asks you, what is a computer? Well, you can tell them that a computer is a machine that is powered by electricity or magic for all we know, and it's essentially used for storing information, for retrieving information, for carrying out certain actions with whatever information we need. And this information can be in any form, it can be of any type. And to do this, we have to speak to the computers. The humans have to communicate with the computers. And to do this, we have to convert our normal language, so for example, English, into the language of computers, which is binary. And once we've done that, the computers are able to understand what we need the computers to do. And in order to tell the computers what we want it to do, we have to give it instructions, essentially a set of instructions laid out nicely. We have to give the computer some sort of additional information, some input, and depending on what the input we give to the computer, it will result in some outcome, hopefully the outcome that we want. And that's essentially a computer. So yeah, there we go. So thanks for watching. This was the first lesson of this entire course. Now we have a better understanding of what is a computer. We've defined it, and going forward we will have a slightly more sort of awareness of what the different aspects are, what makes a computer. So stay tuned, keep watching the lessons. We'll have further lessons in binary, input and output, hardware and software, and so forth. So if you're interested in any of those, keep watching the next lessons. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.